Hello, I'm Jay Bowman. Thank you for your interest in our Q1 forecast for 2026. As we head into this new year and look at construction activity at a high level, it looks to be relatively flat. But that headline can be misleading really in two directions. First, flat doesn't mean that there isn't growth opportunities. In fact, there are several segments that we're seeing tremendous growth prospects, not just this year, but in the next 3 to 5 years to come. But second, flat also doesn't mean the same, meaning it's not the same market that it was last year or the few years prior. Because in some segments, what we're really witnessing is major structural change, not just a pause in the cycle. So the best way to describe the market over the next couple of years is not boom or bust, but rather a market that is defined by greater sort of selectivity, if you will. Now, if you look at the numbers more deeply, and again, saying that total construction in the U.S. for 2026 looks to be relatively flat to modestly up on the order of about, say, 1%. That still keeps total construction spending in the U.S. at about that $2.2 trillion number. Now, even when we account for inflation, it's still at historically high levels. So again, a very large market. And even if we break it down in the major sectors of residential, non-residential buildings, which I consider to be vertical construction, and non-building structures, or really heavy civil, they're still well within that 2% to even as much as 4% range. And going forward, we'll start to see that momentum pick up as it settles into more of like a traditional 4% range between now and 2030. So the real story here is not the averages that this forecast suggests, it is the mix. Growth in some segments and severe pressure in others. Now, my first big takeaway from this is that AI and power-related construction are not only just driving demand, they're introducing new types of risk that extend across the entirety of the industry. Now, we look more closely at those segments where we think there will be continued growth or expansion over the next year and even through the end of the decade. The big ones that stand out are obviously data centers and digital infrastructure, but also the power and the water and wastewater systems that support them. All of these segments growing much higher than the average rate for the industry. These segments are consuming large numbers of highly skilled labor in concentrated markets and projects. And that's having this kind of add-on effect of tightening labor availability as well as stretched schedules and even rising project execution risk for companies that aren't even involved directly with data centers or related digital infrastructure construction. And it's for this reason that execution risk can feel high even though the top line number looks pretty good. Now, the second takeaway is that this is not a pessimistic story. It is still a large market with a lot of growth potential. In fact, when you look at the Non-Residential Construction Index, or NRCI, and its civil counterpart, the CICI, both of those are registering over 50, which suggests at a minimum confidence in the market going forward. Now, while we see most of that growth, again, concentrated in areas like data centers and power, there are other areas like some heavy civil infrastructure areas like transportation, as well as some select public institutional areas where this adding this sort of stability to the market. But there is significant pressure in some of the private segments, namely areas like multifamily, traditional office, and even some aspects of manufacturing. All three of these, in some way or another, are really being impacted, whether it's by capital availability, oversupply, or even these longer-term structural shifts. All this means that even though bull markets and bear markets still coexist, it's extending beyond just the industry level. Now it's residing in the sector and even at the segment level. Now, the third takeaway is that in this type of environment, positioning beats prediction. And so those firms that may have relied on the market to provide growth in the past won't be able to do so going forward. In fact, we're going to have to be much more deliberate about where that growth comes from. And the market leaders that I've witnessed that have done this exceptionally well, the difference is they begin to think like the project owner, meaning they start asking questions about why is this project being built? What problem does it solve? And what are the things that matter to the success of it? Is it certainty? Is it speed? Is it reliability? Is it flexibility? Any of those things might matter. But also they're taking, I would say, a much more cautious approach to some of the commitments they make, particularly if they're going to be hard to unwind if conditions change. So if this raises questions about where your growth and opportunities are going to come from, that's the right reaction. And your next step isn't a better forecast, it's having a clearer understanding of what your position is today. And in fact, that's where FMI tends to help clients most, is translating their environment and their position so they can make better decisions about the organization. Now, there's a whole lot more to unpack here, so I recommend that you download the full report at fmicorp.com. And also talk with one of our bankers or one of our consultants about the specific issues your organization is facing so that you can thrive in this new year. Thank you.